Welcome to Zzeem's studio for another episode of the HPO podcast. I'm Erin Roberts, and I'm a partner at Zzeem. And today I'm interviewing Christine Nielsen, the CEO of the Canadian Society for Medical Laboratory Science. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Zzeem is a consulting and association management agency, and it's a treat to have you join us. Today we're talking about the evolution of the CSMLS. The CSMLS is a professional society and certifying body. The society has over 9,000 members who practice in hospital laboratories, private medical laboratories, public health laboratories, government laboratories, and research and educational institutions. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Christine. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Christine became Chief Executive Officer of CSMLS in 2010. Prior to that, she was Director of Certification for 7 years, with a brief stint as Deputy Registrar for the College of Medical Laboratory Technologists of Ontario. Trained as a medical laboratory technologist, she has degrees and certifications in health administration, prior learning assessment, business and association management. In her spare time, she serves not-for-profits such as alumni associations, the Canadian Society of Association Executives, and my favorite, Book Club for Inmates. So let's give you a brief introduction to what an HPO is. This podcast is part of the High Performance Membership Organization series, otherwise known as the HPO podcast. If you'd like to find out more about what an HPO is all about, just scan the QR code. So, Christine, let's get started. Let's start with the first question and the obvious question. What happened at CSMLS? Share with us where this all started.
What happened? Oh, great question. So what happened? CSMLS is pretty old, almost 100 years old. We started in 1937, delivered our first certification exam in 1938, and that was our roots. So the CSMLS roots are in certification and membership. So we've always sort of been an organization that straddles both the certification and regulatory world. We were helping regulate before regulation existed. And if you know how professions work, in the absence of regulation, an employer sets the standards for work. And so we were fortunate that the whole country, with the exception of Quebec, I will say at different times in their history, had agreed that CSMLS certification is entry-level requirements for the job as a medical lab scientist. So we enjoyed almost 100 years of high-stakes certification that had been accepted by regulators. I had contracts with regulators across Canada, single standard. And, one of the things that you have to be careful of when you do any of our work is if you have a monopoly, which is what we had, it may not be here forever. I think about the taxi industry. So I am going to call what's happening to CSMLS right now our Uber moment.
Ah.
20 years ago, no Uber. You got a cab, you paid what they said. Now we're in a system of choice. So what happened to us was the regulators across Canada, medical lab scientists, as you said, Erin, they decided that they wanted to take control of the national certification exam and really deliver that on their own behalf. So they essentially severed their contracts with me, which they are absolutely legally entitled to do. They had made a choice for decades for CSMLS to be the certification provider in Canada and decided to make a shift, which is hard because I know, Erin, you're going to ask me in a little while, how did my members react? And they wanted me to react with fury. Like, you can't do this to us. And we'll talk later. You absolutely can. We were essentially, as much as I love this profession and we have our roots in certification, we were a vendor. And nobody wants to think of themselves as a vendor. We want to think of ourselves as partners. But at the end of the day, we had a group of people who had been delivering exams, which is us, have to change. And one of the things we'll talk about is how much notice we have, because I think that's the key to making good decisions, is unlike a trade barrier or a taxation barrier that happens like that overnight, I had warning.
Well, I guess we have to be grateful for small mercies. And I'm wondering, did you have, looking back, is there any way you could have known that your partner was heading in a direction that was going to have such an impact on your operations?
Yeah, I will say there was definitely warning signs, and I'll say because I sort of noted earlier that CSMS straddled the regulatory world and we straddled the association
Yeah.
world. There's not a lot of associations that straddle both of those worlds that are left, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Mm.
So I was aware of what was necessary for a high stakes certification program, compliance with fairness commissioners, compliance with the philosophy that students or exam candidates need to have choice, exams have to be valid, fair, all of the things that go into good testing. But I also had this association piece where people got certified, joined me, and stayed. In the olden days, boomers stayed for 35 years.
Wow.
40 years, 50 years. And now my pipeline is going to be fragmented. So my early warnings came about 10 years ago, Erin, when 10 years ago, yeah.
Wow.
And yes, we were in the middle of strategic planning. I remember Peter Waite was our consultant at the time, and he looked at my board of directors and he said, enjoying that monopoly, are you? I wonder how long you're going to be able to hold on to it for. And they said, what? What? Aghast, right? And Peter showed them what was happening to others in industry and where
What?
people had lost this monopoly. And
Even
so
that far back.
2017. And we
Wow.
started to say in our strategies, we need to make sure we are not too reliant on this certification business for our future success. So at that time, Erin, I was doing activity-based accounting. So I could tell you how much marketing costs, I could tell you how much certification costs, but I almost started to prepare my financial work for the board two different ways. Here's how much we have. Here's how much the association has. Here's how much revenue certification's making for us. If this goes, we are going to have to do some pulling. And so our board has always been aware that certification was a service that happened to have a surplus on many years, and we were subsidizing the members with the certification program. So I know we're going to talk a little bit later. How shocking was this? It's shocking when someone pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
But we'd had warnings of fragmentations in relationships. Some provinces wanted to own the competency profile, and we owned it. We paid for the development of the job task analysis, the testing. We looked after all the security concerns, the registration, the reporting, the contracts. We did all of that in partnership with the regulators. We did that
Yeah.
for them. But when they realized that they didn't have as much autonomy as they wished, because the person who owns the competency profile chooses the accreditation body.
Hmm.
Of course, it would be career suicide to choose something that doesn't agree with the regulators. But that was the first time, 2017. It was also around the time the Canadian Medical Association said they were pulling out of accreditation. So we now have not just MedLab, but 15 other professions that have to find a home for this multi-million dollar accreditation business that has been rendered homeless by the Canadian Medical Association because rightfully so, they decided just to look after the accreditation of physicians and
Yeah.
surgeons. So we had some warning, Erin, but then, we added in KPIs. Are the regulators complaining? No. I added in KPIs about are regulators still coming to meetings? Yes. Are they still participating? Yes. Like some of the things you would think would be obvious early indicators. What I didn't have on the key performance indicator was group of regulators received $4 million grant from the federal government to change systems. I
Right.
didn't have that in the cards. I wouldn't have had a KPI for that. But they were given seed money by the federal government to see what was possible for change. And they were able to take advantage of opportunities to increase access to the profession, which is a huge government priority and has been for 2 decades, frankly, especially in health. So had this little windfall not arrived, I probably had a bit more lead time to enjoy my monopoly.
Well, this sounds like kind of a redundant question. I didn't realize, going back 10 years that the trend was already, started. But I guess I'm asking if
Oh,
I say, is there a trend here? I guess
oh,
the answer is yes, right?
I did a tiny bit of research. Medical Council Canada, independent in 1912, medicine. Pharmacy, independent in the 60s. Physio, 94. OTs in 90. So I've been around CSMLS since 2003. So guess what I witnessed? 2010, paramedics. Nursing, 2015. So I'm almost the third phase.
Wow.
Now, who's still independent? Respiratory therapy, medical radiation technology, sonography, and veterinary medicine. And I'll tell you, I've had conversations with friends and other associations who have told me, I think you're the canary in the coal mine.
Jeez. Well, now
Yeah,
we get,
yeah. Great.
I think you've already addressed this. I was going to ask you how much of your revenue was affected, and I think you said about $1 million, and
Yeah.
how much of your staff is going to be affected?
That is a great question. The obvious right now, Erin, so the certification department was earning, say, 1.2 to 1.4 million a year on a $4.5 million budget. So
Yeah,
good chunk of revenues.
yeah,
5 staff members. 5 and a little bit of my time too, right? A little bit of accounting's time, a little bit of IT's time, right? So probably closer to 6.5 full-time equivalents.
wow,
It is likely after the change takes place, which the official date for the change is March 1, that will shrink to two full-time staff.
that's
It's huge.
difficult.
It's huge. Yeah.
Well, I know you said you this wasn't unexpected and that you were expecting it at some point, but as you said, once the gun is actually there, how did you feel? What was your reaction when you got the news?
It's one of those things that happens in your career. And every time my boss would send me an email that's like, we should talk, I'm like, is this the day I'm getting fired?
Yeah,
And so I get a random request for a meeting that only requires me and all of the executives of the regulatory group. And I'm like, this is it.
yeah,
So I go to my meeting in June. It's scheduled for an hour. It lasts approximately 4 minutes. The news is delivered to me. And I thank them and tell them that I look forward to the next steps in a smooth transition because there's nothing else left to say. Like it is fully within their scope as a regulator to change service providers. And they have contracts. The amount of notice they give me is within the window there. Devastating. In my heart, I know what this means to my organization. I know what this means to my profession. I'm a member of this profession too. But the only thing to do at that time was they said they would follow up in writing. Um, yeah, it was a tough day. I've been practicing my poker face for 10 years.
oh,
And so I needed it that day. I thanked them for the clarity because I had been asking for about a year and a half while their project was underway. What does this mean? Does this mean a move away from certification with our organization? And I was assured over and over and over again, nope, nope. That's not what that means. So I had let my board, this is probably going to become important for people. I had let my board know about some instability and information that I was receiving that I wasn't sure was the full scope.
yeah.
And naively, a board member's like, well, why don't you just ask them? And I thought, oh, yeah, I've been a CEO for 10 years. I never thought to ask what's going on. Thank you. I will ask again. So honestly, it was a relief. I now know. I know what the termination date is. I now have. So that meeting was in June of 2024. I'm now suspending service March 1, 2026. So like 17 months, 18 months to wrap up like a huge chunk of business, but a huge piece of our identity,
Yeah.
right? This is who we are. This is what people know us as. Who am I now? And that's what we're going to talk about. Who am I now?
Well, it sounds to me like, being closer to it, you probably had that looming sense of something a little bit more in your head, perhaps than the board. How did they react?
Well, that's the beautiful thing. So, I work for medical lab scientists, and if you know anything about medical lab scientists, I liken their personality to engineers and computer programmers, detailed people. No amount of detail is too much for them. So, at all of these meetings I'm going to with my regulators, I'm chronicling the instability and the ick feeling that I have, which is why 6 months before this happened, someone said, why don't you just ask? And I'm like, but I have. And this
Yeah.
is me disclosing to you that something could be afoot that could stand to change who we are. And so I would say the board was aware of the instability and the unease themselves. We were all in it together.
Yeah.
And I would also say one of the things that I've worked with amazing consultants and firms like you, Erin, and I said to my board, I think I need to do some contingency planning. I think they're going to make a substantial change to our business model. I don't know if we're going to be able to compete. I don't know if there's going to be a choice by province about what standard they align with. I don't know if they're going to deny us an ability to compete. We should do some scenario planning. So we did some soul searching in the safe spot in 2023. Remember, I didn't get my announcement till 24.
Yeah.
And I invested $10,000 to $12,000 in some big I'll call them eye-opening meetings with the director of certification, which is tough, with the chief financial officer, which is even tougher, with the chief marketing officer, who also knows we find members through certification. We are having a really uncomfortable conversation a year, and I feel like Chicken Little, right? The sky's falling. Well, it hasn't fallen yet, but I'm not going to let it fall. So we
Yeah.
had done some contingency planning. We mapped out scenarios, and the beautiful thing was the consultant we work with said, if this change happens, tell me what it means to CSMLS. Tell me what it means to a member. Tell me what it means to an employer. And tell me what it means to industry. And what we had to
Uh-huh.
realize, industry might not care. Pardon? Pardon? What do you mean? The person who needed us to remain as the standard most was us. And then when you realize that, when you do a SWOT analysis and a pest analysis, this is the P, this is the political. It can happen overnight. So we at least had kind of dealt with the awful feelings together. Like we have three scenarios. We know which one we'd prefer, which is CSMLS remains the sole provider in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, unlikely, right? And now we have to say, what if we're competing with a group of regulators? There's not enough market share for either one of us to split the market. So now what does it mean if there's no certification? Like, pardon? That's what we've done since 1938. What if there's no certification for this industry? Would the public know? That was the next lens we asked Erin. What difference would it make for the public? And like, wow, do these conversations in safe spaces, not when you're in crisis. Because we did that in 23. We filed it with the board. Thank you. We were happy to have a roadmap about what would happen if an announcement came, and it did. So we also knew we would be heading into strategic planning. So the board has been very good at investing our reserve funds in contingency planning and what ifs.
And that is something that we don't see enough of in the association world. I mean, I remember talking to you about when COVID hit,
Right?
and you guys already had a plan in place in the event that something like that happened. And it must be such a relief when you get the bad news to know at least, we have a plan in place.
You have the flow chart. If this, then that. If this,
Yeah,
then that. You're absolutely right. When COVID hit, and medical lab scientists, of course, we were a little paranoid about another COVID hitting because we'd lived through SARS.
yeah,
And I think I remember telling you, you're right, Erin. We had a business continuity plan about what to do if a pandemic was local, just in Hamilton, provincial, just in Ontario, just in Canada, in the whole world. So we
yeah.
actually had a 25-page document of
Wow.
what to do, including IT systems. How do we manage isolation of employees? How do we manage work from home? We were fortunate. And I will say I'm very grateful to the organization because of the prepared nature of medical lab scientists. They don't see a $10,000 investment in a what if as frivolous.
Yeah, good
It's
point.
smart planning.
Yeah, yeah. And not all boards would have felt that way.
Agreed. Like wait for the crisis to happen.
Yeah.
And we also, we'll talk a little bit later, we had money in the bank. So we could figure our way out of a problem with money. But wouldn't it be nicer to plan in a nice, calm, relaxed setting before the house is on fire?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Christine, because you know from having worked with boards for a long, long time that when people get scared or panicky, it's really hard to have your board focused and making good, thoughtful
Good
decisions.
decisions. Yeah, definitely.
Now, you mentioned earlier about your members reacting with anger, I guess.
Yeah.
Was that mostly what you heard?
I've been with the society for a really long time, so I got to feel all the feels with my members. Like I have been in the trenches with some of our members, like 97, 98, when we were creating exams. So the testing system is really close to me too, and to several of our members. I had members calling me saying, "Are you guys going to be okay? How dare the regulators do this?" And I'm like, "But they legally can, right?" And so I have to start my conversations by defending the actions of
Good.
the regulator, which is tough.
Yeah,
Um, which was tough, right? But I have to respect their autonomy because I understand how regulation works in Canada. I understand health and education are autonomous. They're by province, which is why we don't have a single national registry for medical lab scientists. Manitoba can do it differently than Ontario, and that's okay. That's the law.
yeah,
So I had to sort of start from a position of calmness. And then the other thing I learned is, despite having really engaged members, they don't read your financials. They don't come to your annual general meeting. So I started by reassuring them, we're still here in Hamilton. The doors are still open. This is a big financial loss, but we're planning our way out of it. We've been working on strategic planning and contingency planning, and I always say, you can read the balance sheet. We have generous assets. Those are the members' assets. Those are not Christine's money to do what she wants with it. Those are member assets. And I said, we also own the building in Hamilton and the land. Like, if you looked at how long we could afford to have $1 million loss, it's 5 or 6 years that I could
Wow.
just continue hemorrhaging cash and then have to sell the building.
Right.
So we're not going to let that happen. So I've been able to talk to individuals. We've done member open forums. I've been accessible to the members. I will call any member at their home if they want me to. I email people and they're shocked that the CEO's emailing them. And I'm like, I work for you. Without you, I have no work, right? Like here's the beautiful thing though. One of the things we've started doing is any inquiries that come into CSMLS now, members are answered first. Non-members can wait a week because members pay our salaries. And the staff are like, we can do that? I'm like, you can totally do that. We're a membership organization now, rebranding, right? We've always been membership, but we certified first. Then you
Yeah.
became a member. Now, membership first.
That's an interesting transition. And I have to think, as an employer, I would have been nervous about, getting staff involved, letting them know in 2020, 3 or whatever, that could very well
Yeah,
happen. I'd be afraid I was going to lose those people.
yeah.
What happened with staff morale? How are you all managing
Oh,
through that?
that's a great question. So obviously, the certification department realized certification is going from this to this. So one of the things that the very first thing I did June 2024 is I called human resources and I said I need to implement a retention and bonus plan
Ah,
for the certification and prior learning assessment people because those are all smart people that work there. They realize not all of them will make the transition past March 1 of this year. And so we began setting performance criteria, and part of it was to remain positive because it is awful when your business has been declared redundant. And I think the most heartbreaking thing, in particular for my director of certification, we didn't do anything wrong. In the
yeah.
pandemic, we ramped up testing. We pivoted to remote proctored testing. We sped up access to the profession when several other healthcare professions were paralyzed for 2 years and couldn't certify a single person. This is the thanks we get. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So I have to put those personal things aside, but we did move to making sure staff are felt appreciated. It is tough. I will not lie. We had some challenges in the negotiation of the safe transfer of all of we do foreign qualification recognition, and a single file can have 2,000 papers in it, and there's thousands of clients. So we had to port them from our system over to their system. There's just complexity in the details that had to be managed between, I'll say two vendors, right, with a
Yeah.
long history of partnership. And there was always things that were misunderstood or misinterpreted or deadlines that changed. So it was frustrating to be in the weeds. We're almost out of the weeds now. So I have a policy that bad news first always, and to those most affected. And so certification knew the day the news dropped, on the same day my president knew a big change is coming. I can't tell you what this is going to mean. We've been doing monthly updates on, we call it the transition, what this transition looks like, where we're having some pinch points. And we finally, at the last staff meeting, said we can stop talking about this now. It happens March 1. It's in our past. And it's been really hard to ride the waves there. So, of course, why not do a staff satisfaction survey in December and find out how the people really feel? Well, knowing that we're going to have major transition and other people can do the writing on the wall. Like right now, my director of research, his job is to find out how to monetize research. Research is a cost center, it's like marketing. So, he can see writing on the wall. He needs to figure out how his work has exceptional value to the
Yeah.
people who pay their dues to us. There could be some reports we do in the future, Erin, that they're employer reports. You'll need to pay for that.
Hmm.
We can't have our members paying for the only report that you will use as somebody who doesn't pay to support us. So
Right.
we're in an entrepreneurial mindset, but staff told us 100% know what their job is, and I have clear expectations, whether I'm working from home or in office. That's great in the post-COVID world. 90% agree work doesn't cause an unreasonable amount of stress and the pace is good. And 75% agree there's effective communication among departments. And I'm shocked at that number because my pre-pandemic conversations about communication across department was only about 50%. And
Wow.
people tell you 50% is pretty good because communications, everyone lags behind on great communications, and 75% think we're doing a pretty good job, and 95% feel recognized and appreciated. So
Wow.
after a year and a half of gut-wrenching transition, people are feeling, I don't want to say great, but okay.
That's impressive.
Okay. Yeah, right. And I also did warn the board though, this is the baseline. It's only going to go down from here. And then in a couple of years, we expect it to go up.
Wow. Well, I guess one thing that is really helping is that you were in really good financial shape when this
Yeah.
hit the fan, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like really good financial shape. We've had multiple years of surplus revenues. I've noted that we own the building in Hamilton, Ontario. It's sitting on a balance sheet. If you know your activity, your accounting principles, it's sitting on a balance sheet at its 1994 value, which is $2 million, which is probably much bigger than that. And our
Yeah.
current reserves are sitting at 5.2 million.
Well, that's great. So you've got
It's
more than a
huge.
year of operating reserves, even based on your old
Yes, if
model.
we didn't have one member show up next year, I could still keep the doors open for if I sold the building 2 years with no income.
That's a very fortunate position to be in. And I
Yeah,
think it's worth pointing out here, your financial position is pretty rare in the association
yeah,
world. I mean, anecdotally, what we've found is that organizations typically have less than 6 months of operating expenses in reserve.
yeah. Erin, I think I'll also say this too. I know some of the names of the attendees. Some of you know my staff. I have a leadership team that has two people who've been with me for 15 years. My
Wow.
CFO and marketing. Marketing is a certified association executive, and the junior executive's 8 years old. So I have a very trusted team, and we have long service staff. We probably have 10 people that have been with us for 15 years or more. 15 years is not an accident. I joined as CEO 15 years ago. So there was a lot of transition at that time, but we have held on to amazing staff. And I would say I wouldn't be so optimistic about the future if I didn't have this strong leadership team, and staff who trust us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, let's talk about that. The good news is we've got a plan.
got a plan.
We've got some money. We've got a good team. So where do we go from here?
Oh, yes. And so the consultant that we worked with during strategic planning, Meredith Lowe, said to our board at a very frank discussion, she mapped out if you keep the way you're going the way you are and have no new revenue sources, don't cancel any of the programs and services, and my hand's going to fall off the screen. You will be out of cash. You will not exist. So she said, so our idea during the strategic plan is to build a CSMLS that will be here for another 100 years. And so after a big sigh, because it's a big thing to take on, right? Because every single board member in that room has been certified by us. They believe in this organization, they believe in the standards we represent, and that piece has been removed now from your identity. And so we had some tough times during strategic planning because it is really hard to agree that there's going to be things you have to stop doing.
Yeah.
And so we were armed with data, though. We've done member value proposition studying, and we've also been investing in alternate ways to find members that are not just, you got certified, thank you, take out your membership. So we were already developing these new, I don't want to call them marketing channels because that feels sleazy, but new member acquisition pathways, which are going to become critical in the new CSMLS because the old way, I certify you, you become a member, I don't even know who you are. How do
Yeah.
I find you? Yeah, so we've had to reinvest in those things that are going to be different and there's going to be change. And so some of the things that you love as a program, you may be the only one of three people in the country who thinks that's a good use of money. So we're constantly now, we've done a full review. We called it a 3D model of all of our programs and services. We used 10 of our 20 staff in an assessment about organizational fit of the program. How many people are using it? How much does it cost to run? What's the volunteer time to run? And I'll just pick an example. Grant scholarships and awards. I'm lucky. I have a $1.2 million reserve. All of the grant scholarships and awards come out of that. I don't have to take operational money. But we do grant scholarships and awards twice a year. Every university and college does it once a year.
Yeah.
Why are we doing it twice a year? We're pretty organized. Why can't, so that's one of the things that's, it doesn't impact a lot of people, but it's self-sustaining. These committees are very well run, only 2 times a year. So can we use that time better and still allocate the funds? Yes. So there's some low value propositions like our work on the international front. We've agreed to maintain membership for a year, but to scale back our in-person participation. And by doing that, we saved about $30,000.
Wow.
So we did warn the board, though. Some of your sacred cows are going to come up, and they're going to be slated for termination, modification, or investment. And so that's what we're now doing with the 27 programs and services we do, is what quadrant do they fall into and how do we make them better, more efficient, more impactful for the members. Guess what? I didn't have to worry about this before. I had $4.5 million rolling in every year, certifications making money, people join and stay as members. I don't want to say we were apathetic, but we didn't have the urgency
Right.
for that level of scrutiny. And we do have it now.
You raise a really good point because often with strategic planning, even if it's not in a almost crisis mode as you're referring to, one thing we're not good at is jettisoning things.
Right?
We have all sorts of beautiful ideas, but yeah, you're right.
And really ask, what is the ROI for a member?
Yes.
I have some programs right now that is special scholarship program, right? 3 people a year. I could cancel it and no one would notice,
Yeah.
really. And it's hurtful because guess who gets those scholarships? Young leaders of tomorrow.
Right.
Guess who the future is? Young leaders of tomorrow. So there's some things we've just sort of set are on pause because I'm going to tell you, I'm blindingly optimistic. I think the ship's going to be righted within 24 months.
Wow, that's great.
Could be
Well,
hallucinating here.
okay, well, let's talk about that. If you figure that's the case, then you must figure that in the next 24 months, you will be able, there's some opportunities you're going to be able to take advantage of, and there's some challenges you will be able to get through. Tell us,
Yeah.
what are the kind of the top three?
Well, the coolest thing during strategic planning is we literally have stated now association first, because in the past it kind of was implied it was certification first. And I'll say if you are managing complex relationships with regulators, there's many things that your members want you to say and do that you can't.
Yeah,
So now that I have taken off the coat that involves constantly monitoring these relationships because I have a financial contract tied to them. I have a lot of things tied to them for our success. I don't have that anymore. My success now is tied to members, member satisfaction, and my financial well-being. It's a different day. So, members first is, I would argue it should have always been, but when certification is a high stakes, highly visible part of your business, risk management, like there's a lot of attention that has to be paid there. And a student that's failed an exam, they all threaten to sue. People take you to human rights tribunal because they don't think you've assessed their credentials fairly. Like you spend a lot of corporate energy on those things, risk management. And now, how may I help you?
yeah,
Completely different. So there's some opportunities for new member acquisition. We currently own, depends on the market. Some markets like Ontario, about 55% of the market. Atlantic Canada, people who are eligible for membership for technologists, almost 100%. Quebec, 10%. British
ah,
Columbia, 20%. I have huge market gains to be made through different types of communication, different types of services. So, new member acquisition is all hands on deck.
yeah,
In particular, meeting students where they are. One of our programs is a voluntary certification. And so and there's a huge potential market gain there. Like, we probably have 15% of the market. So we've got room to grow. And now in the past, we would have said it doesn't make sense for someone to get on a plane, go to Saskatchewan and meet the students. And now we're like, that's an investment.
yeah, yeah.
It's a completely different mindset. So we have some membership share gains that could be made with good investment and good marketing, good programs and services.
So, in terms of your targets, do you have some specific targets? Do you have a sense of what kind of targets you've got?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm separating the MLT and the MLA market. So the MLT market, that's the one that CSMLS lost the exam on.
Yeah.
We were planning for a 5% reduction in membership this year, and we're actually doing better than expected
Ah,
because people are starting to realize CSMLS is my association. This is my voice. I am different than the regulator. So we were pleasantly surprised with some modest investment in changing marketing that we are better than budget so far for
wow.
2026, which is great. The
Yeah.
renewals and retention rate was good. We're having better conversion from MLAs taking, those are the unregulated, from we've got more of them coming to exam and more of them taking out membership and more of them retaining membership. So that's an entire pocket that has longevity.
Yeah.
So it's been amazing to think about the underinvestment we had made for a few years when we still had our certification program intact and I'll say like a cash cow. The
Yeah.
MLT exam was a cash cow. That's what we call them. You look at your quadrants as an association, there's like one thing sitting in the cash cow, and that's like protected at any cost
Yes.
because it's where you get to do all the other things. We've scaled back our advocacy. My advocacy program was on paper $120,000 a year. It's sitting now at $10,000 a year because until we hear from our members in the new world, what am I advocating for? Because I
Yeah.
used to advocate for regulation. Ha, there's the irony, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not advocating for regulation right now, except in the province of Alberta, which is still remaining our partner in certification.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack.
You realize that every day looks a little different right now, right? The things that we used to say yes to. Can you come out and meet with the Deputy Minister of Health because we want to move forward with regulation? The answer is no.
Yeah.
And we've always said yes. I've talked to friends that work at other associations that said, I feel like we're kind of where you are, where you're doing too much. It's not all of great value, and we have no permission to say no.
Right. A good
And
point.
you are giving your staff permission to say no.
It's kind of like you've got this elderly aunt that has a lot of money that you're hoping to inherit.
Right? Totally. Right? I'm building trust right now, and I think accessibility to members and not hiding it. The other thing I would say that was really important to us in the beginning was trying to control the message because I didn't want the regulators delivering my messages.
Yes.
And so CSMLS had been working for 90 years, right? We have paid professional staff who do marketing communications, press releases. A new organization setting up a new business doesn't always have that. So, what we would do to remain partnerly was to say, we need to send out a communication by the end of the month. We hope that you will have a like a similar communication ready to go as well, but this is our drop dead date. We'd like to collaborate. Turns out we couldn't really collaborate on messaging, but both parties tried. And so we wanted to make sure that we were in charge of the message about who CSMLS is and our rebuild. We weren't just going to certification's gone, now what? So
Yeah.
we had monthly, no, quarterly outreach to our members. We talk about it at the annual general meeting. It's in our journal. We've got researchers working on, is this good for the profession? So we're publishing their material saying, we don't know. Is this good for the profession? It promises some flexibility. Might be good, might not be.
Well, what about your personal the change in your career, really? I mean, you've been 15 years at the organization, and
Yeah.
although I'm sure there's been a lot of change in that period of time, this kind of dwarfs everything else. It probably
That
wasn't what you were thinking of, for 2026.
right. That is so true, Erin. Um, I would say, with a high performing organization, cash in the bank, CSMLS was in a was and still is in a great, great shape. Strong. And one of the things we did during our strategic planning is what is our brand? What is our reputation? Because we need to maintain quality.
Yeah.
And when you run a high stakes certification that's the only standard in the country, you get given that because you haven't made a mess of it. Now we need to make sure we maintain the brand we've earned, right? And one slip up, it's gone in the minds of the members. So we're definitely aware of our responsibility. So I told you at the beginning, like the people most affected need the information first.
Yes.
And that's how we make sure that we're rolling out new programs. People who are most affected, if we're canceling programs, we've made sure the volunteers know before they see CSMLS announces closure of Young Professionals Task Force. Like you tell the people first, right? For me, it's always been about respect.
Yeah.
Respect for those closest to the project or closest to be impacted. And then, of course, the governance, Lynn, your board needs to know. Your board chair always needs to know first. And I think, a single obsession with that will help me in the biggest challenge of my career. I inherited CSMLS at a time of great change in staffing, great change in board, but still cash in the bank, still great reputation, still a monopoly. And so I think that this is definitely a really great opportunity because I was handed a very stable organization with deep reputation, big membership numbers, contracts with regulators. I was given a gift when I became the CEO, maintained the gift, and now, my job is now to reposition who we are and leave it for the next CEO in good shape.
And you've got the runway to do that, which is amazing.
I feel bad because I've talked to friends who, they tell me they've got 6 months reserves. That's it. They're
Yeah.
not sure until the vendor check comes in if they can make payroll. And I've never had to work like that. And I would say I work best when I have a long runway and I can strategically plan and assess the impact of a decision that I make today, 6 years from now. Everyone's not so lucky, and everyone
Yeah.
doesn't have the amazing team around them that I have. I know I have a gift. It's my job not to mess it up right now.
Well, last question. And Christine, I think this is probably a reason why a lot of the people are on the call right now. What advice would you give CEOs? And I'm going to say who are facing a similar situation. I don't just necessarily mean the regulator changing their mind, but a similar situation where a big chunk of your revenue
Yeah.
is now at risk or about to be gone. What would you recommend to another CEO?
Ooh. Oh, it sounds like I'm a broken record, but clarity and communication, especially when things are not unknown. Like I've walked into board meetings before where I have a pit in my stomach because, your job as CEO is to have all the answers, and I don't know what's happening with my partner. I can't tell my board with certainty what this means, what the impact is, if all of the provinces are going to align with the change that we think is coming, how big is it going to be, how soon is it going to be? I can't answer that. Like I feel sick to my stomach. And so of course I can't tell my staff anything because I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm trying my best. I'm using all of my skills. I'm leveraging personal relationships that I have in the industry to find out what is going on. And I still don't have answers, but the right thing to do is to not is I'm going to use a double negative. The right thing to do is disclose this discomfort and to make sure that your leadership team is also helping you because one of them is a member of the profession, two of them are not. They see things I don't see because I'm too close to it. I sit in the meetings. I'm too close to the regulators. I'm too close to the contracts. So they can see things from the outside. The chief financial officer and in particular marketing, they can see things that I don't see. And they start to say, marketing, I'm going to need to build new member pipelines a year and a half before we actually have to build a new member pipeline. Like they had the foresight to begin to think. Joe starts working on modeling and showing that the decline. We had to have that sudden, abrupt loss of revenue to show the board it is time for action.
Right.
So I think bad news up front. I think leverage your networks. Don't be shy to talk about this stuff. I've talked about this as a preliminary at the summer summit, and many people came and thanked me because we don't talk about our problems. We talk about our
Yes.
successes, and I have
Yes.
a legitimate problem right now. One of my staff members who's most impacted by this change left the session in tears because this is still emotional, right? But not talking about it's not right.
Yeah, that doesn't make things better and it doesn't make them go away, unfortunately.
No, and somebody said to me, Christine, what will you do if one of the regulators sees this podcast? And I said, I would never say anything that's not accurate. I'll tell you, a little bit more behind the scenes if we're behind the scenes and it's just you and I, but this is what I will say publicly, and we've put lots of things in writing to talk about, we're sad. We thought we had a great system and a great relationship where we wish the decision wasn't made, but we will move on from here.
Yeah.
And that's hard for our members to hear too. Like, they're like, what do you mean you're just giving up? No, but we're planning for the future.
And that sounds pretty critical because you're right. Without the right communication, people would have just thought, oh, I guess you're getting wiped off the face of the planet.
I don't need to renew my dues. You don't
Yeah.
need me anymore. Like, there's a new sheriff in town. And, the fact that more people have renewed than we expected is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's our job to maintain it now.
It sure is. Well, Christine, let's go to some live Q&A. I see we've got a couple of questions.
Oh,
Kevin, do you
good.
want to share some questions with us?
Certainly. So our first question was CSMLS able to increase its non-dues revenue? If so, how supportive and involved was the board in this push?
That's a great question. I say we're early days. So January 1 was technically our new fiscal year because the major transition hasn't happened yet. It's happening March 1. So I still had to maintain business as usual with the contracted services for the students or the clients in Canada as well as for the regulators. So absolutely there's investment in pursuit of non-dues revenue now that include things that we're experts in, such as exam supports, advice, career advice. We didn't really talk about any of the generational behavioral differences that's happening, but what's happened at CSMLS is our millennials and our Gen Zs behave very differently than baby boomers for longevity and membership. So we're having to a la carte their life. And while I would prefer that they stay as a member, it's not beyond me to sell you something. So if Kevin needs a practice test on Tuesday, I will give Kevin a practice test on Tuesday. So we're looking for alternate markets as well. There's another group of people also in medical lab field adjacent, combined lab X-ray technologists, that the association and the people have told us, I don't have enough access to education. This is what we do. Education for medical lab scientists, and a combined lab X-ray technologist sits between technologists and lab assistants. So I have what those folks need. I've just never made it available. So we're pursuing some new opportunities. We've signed a memorandum of understanding with Combined Lab X-ray Technologist Society, the Canadian Society, to help work on mutually beneficial programs such as learning. So I don't have the non-dues revenue answer yet. In a year, I will.
Sounds good, Christine. So our next question is, obviously you've been blessed with a membership that's highly engaged and a membership that cares not only about the survival of the organization, but the well-being of the people who run it day to day. So how have you communicated this whole transition with them?
That's a great question. It started in June. We issued our first notice to the members in August of 2024. To be frank, we pushed the regulators to do an announcement first so that we could echo it, and they didn't. So we were stuck breaking the news to the community, including our accreditation sponsor, including the educators. But it was the right thing to do. We had given them a lot of time to fill the gap, and they were not able to. And I think around the same time, it's a question of which one went first, but it was around August 10th, August 11th that we released a communication. And then the other group did it right afterwards. So I don't remember if we went first or they went first, but we just told them, like, in simple scientific terms, our members are not flowery people. They're bullet people, like bullet point people. So they want just the facts. Thank you, like accounting. So we had to tell them CSMLS has been served notice of termination of contracts that impact every future certificate in Canada. What does this mean? We're not sure. We're committed to working in partnership with the regulators for a smooth transition, and more communication will follow. So of course, the phones light up as soon as that goes out, right? Most impacted, as you would understand, would be schools who have to meet the competency requirements. They're all accredited. So they're going to be the first impacted, and their students are going to be second impacted because they have to write an exam. And third impacted is going to be employers. So right now, though, employers haven't yet been impacted because the product, the students that are certified, are not yet in the market. So everyone had their own sort of reaction to where this information matters to me most. And so it was the educators first. So we had to, and I've been open, like I have open forums with our members. It's Ask Me Anything at noon and 7 p.m. And so we do a standard presentation, but then you can literally ask me about the transition. It was important for us to be accurate. So rather than talk about something that was rumor, we would often send them to the source themselves, right? Like this is the new group who's doing it. They have their policies, procedures, protocols, fees, those are all there. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to tell you about another organization's business. And then our members are like, oh, that makes sense. So once they kind of know where they're going to go for information, who's my contact, one of the challenges is they weren't fully staffed yet. So our staff turnaround with 22 staff will be within a day. We had people who were saying, but I'm not getting any answers. No one's got back to me in a week. And I'm like, I can't answer another organization's systems for you. And I'm sorry. And we would say that. I'm sorry this is happening. And this is what we need to do together. Especially somebody who's, applied from Nigeria. They've got a file that's half open and there's a day that we have to stop services. Where's my file going? Do I have to pay more money? Who's going to pick up do I have to start again? Do I have to send new documents? Like lots of fear, right? Unexpected consequences because nobody knew the new system. We had a huge 100% increase in people applying for our services, which led to a surplus this year when we were planning a $500,000 deficit. So it was weird. We didn't expect, but it makes sense. Human nature, right? This system, even if I don't like it, I know it. I don't know what the new thing is. I don't know how much it costs. I don't know how fast it'll be. I can't get anybody to answer my email. So we got a huge windfall, which led to some problems with only 5 people working there. So we did the best we could. In the end, though, we had to decide that for integrity, because these are our future members, I cannot charge you for services I cannot render. I need to send you your money back and tell you you now need to go over here to start the process there because I can't deliver your product. And members were mad, and I said to them, but they can't accept the reports after this day. You'll be stuck in limbo, and that's not fair to you. So it's tough. It's just like talking to my board. It's tough to communicate when you don't have all the information and you're not the decision maker. So we could only stick to the facts that we knew.
Wow. Kevin, do we have any more questions?
Yes, thanks for that very comprehensive response, Christine. It sounds like you you and your team went above and beyond in communicating with members throughout the transition. So our next question is, you touched on this earlier at the beginning of the conversation, but why do you think the regulator chose to make this move?
It's a cash cow. It's one of the things. There was also a couple of regulators that wanted some more independence from CSMLS. But I told you, if we were earning $1.4 million, it probably cost me 1.1 to run the service. So on a year where, if we have increased enrollments and more people wanting to come to Canada, there's a little bit of a profit margin in there. And $300,000 is nothing to, it's a lot. It helps you subsidize the rest of your function. So it could be two things. It could be a belief that a different standard was necessary and they were going to be the author of that. Or two, there is some cash involved in this, right? They didn't take on a small exam that's 20 people a year. They took on 4 to 7 exams that are probably 1,500 exam candidates a year.
Kevin, we
Hey, and
probably have time for maybe one more question. Do we have one more?
we do have one more. So this next question is, Christine, on a personal level, how have you been dealing with first the rupture in CSMLS's business model, and then the response, and then this transition that you're in the middle of? And what kind of self-care practices have
Mm.
helped you get through it?
Oh, that's a great question. So I used to say association management, especially at the CEO level, is a game of chess. Um, and I was trying to figure out where my partners were going, and I didn't know, but I knew I didn't know. So, and that's tough because you always want to know. You always want to be able to convey information with confidence, with trust. So I used to call, like I said, a game of chess, but I learned some of the things we do as a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? And some of us make the mistake in the association of sprinting and getting burnt out and not being able to continue on or just being finished with the task, the people, the whatever. So I thought it was a marathon, and I now realize this is an ultra marathon. You know, the challenge before myself and my leadership team and the board is to change the face of CSMLS. When we have a brand, we have a reputation, we have a position in the community that has to be different for longevity. So I've become calendar obsessed in a good way. So I'm constantly scheduling days off. I've been a CEO for a long time. I have a huge allotment of vacation, 6 weeks a year. And so in the summer, 1 week off in June, 1 week off in July, 1 week off in August, I go stone carving. You know, I go and I do the things that allow me to rebalance and no long and for that 1 week, not worry about the business. If I leave the country, I appoint the chief financial officer in charge and her decisions are binding. And the board knows that and my staff know that. And just personally, you know, I try to keep my stress levels down with hobbies like book club for inmates. Like I run a CSMLS book club. I have a book club that you know, that's one of the things that I just like to do, talk about books, right? It's the best outlet for me as a nerd. I give up an hour and think about nothing other than, you know, the book we're talking about. I've taken up bonsai, which that is also an ultra marathon because I have some bonsais underway that you don't get to repot it for a year after you've done the cutting. So you just have to wait and watch. So that's been a little bit of a trip for me because I'm used to be a very impatient person. And self-care in the form of physical activity and regular massage. I blow my massage budget every year, and it is the single most important thing for my mental and physical health that I will always pay for. So, and I was also say I'm fortunate that I have both the time and the space and the trust of my leadership team and my board. You know, it's hard to tell your executive I'm not available on Friday. I'm going to do a gnome sculpture at the botanical gardens. I'm not available, and they respect that. So I don't know if that's boundary setting or setting expectations early on, but it allows me to have the stamina that I never say, oh God, it's Monday. I still love the challenge of this work and this association and the members and the huge task ahead to do a transformational change.
Like
Christine,
that's
I want to thank you for a remarkable and a scary yet positive case study. I know the story's not over yet,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to catch up soon to look at what the next chapter looks like. So thank you very much. It's been really eye-opening to have you here.
Thank you. It was a great time to talk about all the things that keep us up at night. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity and to share with our colleagues. I'll pop my email address in if that's okay, if anybody has a similar situation or just wants to talk, if that's okay.
Thank you, Christine. That would be really helpful. And you know, Christine's story has probably reminded you that it's time to review your strategic plan or create a new one. And a critical starting point is your mission and vision, which just happens to be what we're going to be talking about in our next podcast. So on Tuesday, March 17th, we're going to be talking about why vision and mission matters and how to make it real. These things are much more than the nice to haves. They're really essential governance tools to guide your planning, your priorities, and your choices. So, on our next podcast, we're going to share a simple, effective process to create a compelling and meaningful mission and vision and show you how to use them to drive informed and strategic decision making. See you next month.